Hi guys, welcome to another podcast episode with Horsemanship from Ginny. I'm Yaz, and today's episode I'm going to be talking about, do hot horses really exist, or are they just stressed? So I'm going to start off with a simple, yes, hot horses do exist. However, hot horses does not mean explosive behaviours necessarily. These explosive horses we're seeing at shows, these top competitions and Grand Prix, horses that cannot cope and they're exploding, they're refusing to go forwards, rearing, bucking, all these really stress-induced behaviours you're more likely to see from hot horses and hotter breeds of horses. However, that is not a hot horse, that is stress. You obviously do get hot horses while they're young, green, unbalanced. They can buck, they can throw at the odd rear when they've lost their balance, they've got a little bit confused, blah, whatever. It doesn't, just because a horse is bucked doesn't necessarily mean they're in pain, they're stressed. Sometimes they're excited, sometimes they're a bit giddy. Yes, you do get fresh horses. You can't expect horses just to be relaxed and numb to the world all the time. However, like I said, the hot horses we're seeing in competitions, that's not hot, that's stress. That's stress behaviours being presented by, depending on the personality of the horse and the genetics and the traits that they exhibit, is what determines whether they'll be explosive, whether they'll shut down, whatever they decide to do. Horses that aren't hot are more prone to shutting down. It's not just hot and cold horses as well. You've got your introverts, you've got your extroverts, whatever way they decide, whatever their personality traits are will also influence this. You get some cobs will be heavily explosive. I've seen some cobs throw some right shapes due to stress, because they've never learnt to shut down, or... Yeah, so most hot horses will turn to explosive behaviour, most cold horses will turn to shutting down, depending on which way they go, depends on what homes they end up in, really. Usually the explosive cobs and stuff, though, they'll often have tried stopping before they go to the explosive side of things. They'll try planting, whatever they usually have to be pushed into explosive behaviours rather than going there first. Whether you've got them at 12 years old and they've instantly gone to explosive behaviours, usually somewhere along the lines they'll have started by not being explosive and doing other things, and more often than not being battered into this explosive behaviour that you might see in your horse. Whereas warm bloods, thoroughbreds, things like that, when they get stressed, they are far more likely from the get-go to start throwing legs, throwing some fantastic shapes, bolting, things like that. Cobs can often be bolters as well because they're strong. They'll usually play to their strength. If they're athletic, they'll use their athleticism to try and scare people to backing off due to their stress. Or if they're physically strong and they can drag people, they'll often drag people to where they want to go, napping, plunging their heads down, whatever it is. They'll usually play to their strengths. Hotter horses are more common for this explosive behaviour because their personalities and their genetics lead them to lean further into that direction, and they oftentimes find it harder to self-regulate their emotions. This is also a lot to do with breeding and the kind of horses we breed these days, but that's a whole other podcast and my opinions on that. How horses are raised, I've talked about that in another podcast, where do I think horses should retire. A lot of all these things go into horses and their development and how they learn to deal with stress. A lot of horses don't get taught to deal with stress and they just get ridden through it. And by the time I get involved with a lot of these horses, it's because you can't just force them through it, and they are playing to their strengths and they're using some sort of behaviour that is preventing you from being able to move forwards with the horse. So things like if you've got horses that don't like being at the back of the ride, they'll be rearing, plunging, and your arms are aching all the time, trying to stop them from running off to the front of the ride or just fucking off in general. Some horses will do that, hacking out on their own. that is not a hot horse, that is a stressed horse. The horse might be hot as well, but those behaviours are not signs of just a hot horse. They are signs of a stressed horse. Just because the rider is brave enough to ride it. I saw a video on Facebook the other day. It was a little bit of a joke. Hot girls ride hot horses, and it was just a horse losing its fucking shit at the back of a ride. Hopping, jogging, cantering on the spot. And just because you're brave enough to ride it doesn't mean you should ride through it. It shouldn't be an ego thing that I can ride the hot horses, blah, 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 because at the end of the day, you're putting yourself at danger. More times the horses are doing that, the more likely they are to slip, fall. They're more likely to lose their balance, and the more they lose the balance, the more stress they get. So just because you can ride them through it doesn't mean you should. And horses that display these stress behaviours, they may well love their jobs. They might really love their jobs, but they may say, like, you see barrel racing horses that are losing their shit before they start their race. Yeah, they might love their jobs and they might really enjoy working and stuff like that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that that moment is the signs of a horse being stressed. So just because they love their jobs and just because they love the work and you might see it as they're super excited about doing their work, doesn't mean they're not displaying signs of stress. So just thinking about it along the lines of, you see these people that they walk into, so you get horses before a cross-country course. Some of them are getting really amped up before they actually go through and get the countdown from 10. Not only does, for horses like doing long cross-country courses, that they're expending energy that they're going to need on the course. Surely it'd be nicer to just be able to walk around calmly before you go in, rather than having to hang on for dear life and try and stop your horse from crossing that line before the countdown's finished. Or same out hacking, you can just have your horse on a long rein, and it doesn't change the fact they're hot horses. It might not change the way they respond to things, so they might still be jumpy horses. You can get a horse relaxed and have good self-regulation, but that's not going to change their personalities. If you've got a horse that they start and they flinch when things pop out around a corner, you're unlikely to change that in your horse. They might still start. I don't mind horses jumping, but how do they respond afterwards? That's the important part. And if you've got a horse out hacking and they're a bit jumpy, that's fine. But do they come down from that, or does it keep trigger stacking? Do they get jumpier and spookier until they can no longer handle it? That's where your problem is. If the horse spooks and then it goes, oh, that was fine, and carries on, there's no issue there. You don't need to fix that initial spook. That's largely personality trait and down to the individual horse. But it'd be so much nicer for more people if they could just have their horses on a buckle end and go out for a nice walk out in the countryside, and they're not fighting their horses, and they're not hanging on to their horses for dear life. They're not panicking because the horse is plunging, they're getting dragged down and then bucking and falling off or whatever. All that stuff can be avoided. Hot horses don't have to behave like that. And they shouldn't behave like that. They shouldn't be they put through so much stress that they're acting like that. It's not nice for the horses, let alone the riders. Even if the riders are brave and find it funny and they just giggle along through it, it would be, regardless of that, it would be far nicer for everyone involved if the horse would just walk along on a buckle end. And same with the horses in the dressage ring that are exploding. They might be spooky to start with, and then all of a sudden they're refusing to go forwards. They won't go near the judge's box or whatever. Those horses are trigger stacked. They're not hot. They probably are hot as well, but the hot part of them isn't what's causing that behaviour. It's the trigger stacking and it's the stress that's causing that. This is getting talked about more and more on social media. I'm not the only one person talking about it. It's getting a lot more limelight in the online and things like that. But among the professional circuit and the professional world with horses, whether that be riding schools, top riders, amateur riders working alongside professionals, it needs to be better recognised, signs of stress on these horses, and especially in the competition circuit and the professional circuit, competition places where it's all on TV and stuff like that, normalising this behaviour, and being like, oh, it's just the horse. I think there's a stallion at the minute that has to be led out by 2 people. That shouldn't be breeding, for one. Sure, it's just because it's nice, it's pretty, and it's expensive, and it does well in the dressage ring. It's not a temperament you want to be breeding. But the horses don't have to behave like that. They don't have to be like that. And if it was more accepted among the professionals that it was wrong for horses to be expressing this amount of stress, then it would pass down, it would filter down into the amateur world. People would stop seeing this explosive behaviour as a defiance of your will, or what. People don't really see it like that. People don't word it like that, but it's definitely how people see it. And if people stop seeing this bad behaviour in horses as some sort of defiance against us, it would trickle down into the amateur world, and it would become far less acceptable to see people arguing with their horses and riding their horses through stresses when you can just get off and deal with it, and you can get off and do the groundwork. There's loads of clients I go to that say, just get off them. If it's going wrong, just get off them. And they're like, oh, everyone always tells me never to get off them. Just get off them. The worst that's going to happen if you get off a horse that's in a really bad state is the horse is going to go home and maybe feel like they've won. That's the worst that's going to happen. The horse is going to maybe feel like they've won something. They don't feel like that. Chances are, if you get off a horse, they're going to recognise that you are seeing things. You're understanding their stress. It doesn't mean you know how to deal with it. You don't know how to help them. But the horses will recognise that you're starting to understand that there's a problem. And yes, behaviours that are learnt behaviours need teaching out of horses. So a horse that's learnt to nap and rear through stress, once you've solved the stress, the behaviour can still stick around unless you teach them not to do it, and the behaviour can then trigger stress as well. So it's not that these behaviours don't need dealing with and they'll just be fixed by sorting out the stress, because it doesn't always work like that. But if there was more emphasis in the professional circuits put on horses being happy in their work, not being pushed through the work, and obviously money doesn't help with that, because money puts a lot of pressure on riders, especially when they don't own the horse, they're not paying for their own entry fees, whatever. It creates a lot of external stress that the horses have no understanding of. That's a lot of the time what upsets horses, is they don't understand why you're not listening to them, even from riders that may normally listen to them. They don't understand those external pressures. They can understand when you're having an off day, if you're in a bad mood and maybe you take it out on the horse. They can understand that all day long. They cannot understand when there are external pressures put on you, which you're then putting down onto your horse. But yeah, if you have more professionals put in stress on stressing the importance of your horses being happy and relaxed in the work, more amateur riders will see it less of a ego thing that they sat on. They're the person that people come to when the horses are bucking and rearing and pushing them through bad behaviours. You'll get less rough riders like that. You'll get more people looking to, why is the horse doing this? How can I fix this? How can I make it better for my horse? Rather than, how can I get my horse to do what I want it to do? And stop being so stubborn. That's often the one I get, even from people who don't mean the word stubborn. They don't mean stubborn, but they recognise the horse has learnt behaviours. Oftentimes the people who say stubborn don't mean it, and sometimes the people who mean stubborn don't say it. Horses can't be stubborn. They do not have the mental capacity to be stubborn. They don't have that wiring in their brain. It's not part of them. Horses will seek to better their situation all the time. That's all they're ever looking, to better their situation. If that means kicking off, bucking, throwing the rider, rearing, plunging, bolting, If in their eyes that's going to better their situation and potentially get them out of a situation that they feel is too much for them, they'll do it. Even if that means taking a battering off the rider for doing so, they will still do it. Because in their eyes, it's bettering their situation. They're not having to go over that thing that's scary. They're not having to go in the lorry. They're not having to go towards that pot of flowers at the end of the dressage test. They're not having to approach that very scary jump filler, whatever. Whatever it is, they're not having to do that because they're doing this. Even if it means taking on physical punishments and verbal punishments and being really scared by the punishments. Horses that believe the punishments are worse than the thing they're scared of will eventually push through it, but it won't stop them being scared of the thing. It just means they're avoiding the punishment. Also, if riders at the upper levels start to emphasise on not having to ride through this explosive behaviour, it kind of will start to remove the belief that to be a top rider, you must be riding dangerous horses, because not everyone wants to ride dangerous horses and not everyone needs to ride dangerous horses. You get para riders and they're on some fucking hot horses. A lot of the able-bodied riders believe, and I've spoken to them, they're like, when I've talked to them about the para riders and the para horses I've worked with, they say, yeah, well, but they need different things for... They're on RDA pony. They're not. They're on hot, well-bred, warm bloods. They just have to, because of their disabilities, make sure the horses are happy, because they haven't got the able-bodied abilities of the able-bodied Grand Prix riders to ride through that explosive behaviours. It's much more of a risk to their life, especially if they're paraplegic. They're not going to land well. Some people have soft, like really fragile vertebrae in their neck. If they fall off, they could break their neck far easier than other riders could. They will not ride dangerous horses. That doesn't mean they won't ride hot horses. A lot of those are Paralympic horses, the para horses that I've worked with anyway, were very hot horses that just got taught how to deal with the stress, how to cope with life, and now they're fantastic horses. To be a top rider, you need to be a good rider. That doesn't mean brave. That doesn't mean able to force a horse to trot when it wants to gallop. It doesn't mean being super strong in the hand. It doesn't mean having to be super strong in the leg. It means being skilled. To be skilled, you don't have to be strong. You don't have to be brave. Yeah, you might have a Velcro seat and might be able to sit on anything, but you shouldn't have to. Don't get me wrong, when shit goes wrong, which it sometimes does, even on the best trained horses, you better know how to fucking ride these hot horses. But you shouldn't have to be riding these horses like that every day or every other day, or lunging the horse until it drops before you get on it so that it's not dangerous to ride. If horses learn to cope with stressful situations better, and emphasis was put on teaching horses to self-regulate their emotions properly, you'll likely prevent a lot of rear and often life-ending injuries on young horses. When I was working with Olivia, she was telling me about the amount of horses that go towards that work and the amount of horses that get put down before even breaking them in or just after breaking them in. A lot of these issues you won't have to deal with them. A lot more horses will be capable of doing their jobs. They'll be strong enough to do their jobs because they won't be exerting excess strain on their bodies through the stress that they're constantly living in. And also, the less horses that there are exploding all the time due to stress, and it gets deemed as a bad behaviour, and the horse is just being naughty, the horse is just being stubborn, and you just want them to do as you're told, the less horses presenting like that, the easier it will be to detect pain in horses. Because all too often, pain is put down as a behavioural issue, when in reality it's a pain issue. Whereas if throughout the horse community and the world of training horses, we would put more emphasis on horses being raised properly and socialised properly through their younger years. Start with the breeding. You're breeding nice horses, not nice horses for the competition ring, just for the competition ring. I mean nice horses to handle, nice horses to be around, horses that can cope with life. We should not be breeding high-stress, highly explosive horses to produce more of the same of that. you're just going to create more of a problem. So if the whole horse thing needs changing, especially in the professional circuit, there are plenty of beautiful warm bloods that, because they're not as explosive, they're not showing themselves to these very explosive stallions and mares. They don't look as pretty, but they're more correct. And if more of those horses were bred, and then they were raised properly in varied herds of mixed genders, mixed ages, and mixed personalities, rather than people having to raise horses, and then they go on to continue their lives as they start to come into work with people at 3 years old, start breaking them in, start producing them towards being broken in, then you're going to have less issues as a whole. And because you'll have less explosive behaviours, because the horse is better at self-regulating their emotions, they've got better boundaries set in place, they're genetically wired to be a bit calmer and less reactive to stressful stimuli. When you do get suddenly very explosive horses as you get in on them, it will make more sense to be like, okay, that horse is likely in pain, rather than this horse behaves like this on the ground all the time. It's a fucking nightmare to handle. Of course it's going to be a nightmare to break in. It's just that horse's personality. Its mum was like that. Its dad was like that. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. All these things that make us believe these explosive behaviours are behaviour-related and behavioural issues, when they are pain issues. And just because the horses, and that vice versa, sometimes people assume it's pain issues when it is a behavioural issue and the horse just can't cope with stress. If we had that initial foundation in the horses initially, the genetics are there for the horses to be a calm, easy to work horse, still hot and plenty of energy in it, but they're not stressful. And then they're raised properly to understand boundaries, how to behave, how to react in stressful situations. And then their training follows all those lines, maintaining boundaries, healthy boundaries, and keeping the horses out from getting trigger stacked all the time and living in high levels of stress, including the way that we keep our horses, less stable time, more turnout time, more herd time. And when I say living with other horses, I don't mean one on one side of the fence, one on the other. They need to be in the field together in groups of mixed genders as well, not just mares on one side, geldings on the other, because that causes problems as well. Horses need to be able to mix with one another, socialise properly. All these things that are going into creating these nice, healthy, both mentally and physically healthy horses, and then we bring them up to be ridden horses, and then once we start breaking them in, if a problem then develops, then you can start going, I think that horse is in pain, rather than just assuming it's going to be a behavioural issue that needs training out of them, and they need the energy burning out of them because they're just hot horses. They need lunging before they get on, they need free schooling before you get on, they need running round until they're sweaty before we jump on it. None of that should be necessary. And there are plenty of people that will argue, well, keeping horses in this way isn't doable either because facilities don't allow it, when that should change. If the whole mindset around horses changed, that would change. Or that the horse is worth too much money to be turning out with other horses. Well, the amount of young horses we're losing to kissing spines due to them being raised in stressful situations, horses that are getting put down because they're too explosive and too dangerous to ride, or they can't handle living out for any amount of time, so they run around loads and then they end up breaking their legs, or you do turn them out with another horse and they've got no social skills, so they get kicked and bitten. They don't know when to back off when other horses say, I don't want to play anymore. So they're getting injuries from kicks and bites, or pushed through fencing because they're not getting on with the other horses. All these things, all these horses we're losing to those situations, if we'd lose far less of them than if we raised them properly and their needs were met properly. And that's not to say there are horses that are currently alive that you couldn't just toss out in a herd. They'd lose their minds. Those horses need looking after in the way that is best for them. So if you've got a horse that cannot stay out overnight, and it will hurt them, they will hurt themselves if you try and make it happen, you can do training to undo that and try and get them to stay out longer. But at the end of the day, some of these horses are 18 years old at this point. Let's not make their life misery just trying to change it all overnight. It's a process that needs to happen. And it's a process that needs to happen across the horse world. It's not really a problem you get so much in Western horses. And very rarely I'm seeing little ponies that are getting this kind of anxiety levels, because like I've mentioned before, when you're getting ponies off the feral mountains and off the moors and things like that, they've got good social skills. I'm very rarely hearing of these kinds of horses getting kicked in the leg by other horses. Also, when you've got some horses that they have very little social skills and they don't want other horses near them, they can be a danger to other horses because they'll kick out so hard. They've got no no ability to be fair with their corrections on other horses. So you get good mums, good brood mares that they'll lift a leg and stamp it, and they'll warn, they'll pin their ears. Some horses will give absolutely no warnings before giving a battering of a kick and breaking another horse's leg. And that other horse had no option to move away, no chance to move away. It just kicks out and then you've got a dead horse on your hands. All these social skills are really important for the longevity of our horses. We can have horses living for 30 years if we just change the way that we do things with them. And it's not good enough just people like me, horse trainers like me, coming in to change people's perspective and fix the horses and get the horses to deal with stress better. It's not good enough coming in after the fact and fixing these horses. It's really important that these horses are raised properly. From the get-go, from the breeding of our horses, we are picking good brood mares. We are picking good stallions. It's no good picking a brood mare that's gone off for lameness issues at 4 years old. Why the hell would you pick a mare that's got a suspensory injury at 4 years old, regardless of... fair enough if they've done it in an accident. However, still, I would rather not be breeding from brood mares that are injured, because A, that's extra strain on the mare's body while they're injured and recovering from injuries. B, chances are that mare has something along the lines that favours those injuries, especially at such young age. Kissing spines. Why the fuck are we breeding horses with kissing spines? While the horse may not have hereditary kissing spines, there are epigenetics that come into play which can produce more horses more prone to kissing spines. Explosive behaviours. You've got a mare that's stressed a lot of the time. All those stress hormones are going to be going into the baby the foal while it's being developed in the womb. It's going to pass down through the milk to the foal, passing on stress hormones that foal may not be producing themselves and triggering stress in these animals. People will pick hot, very explosive and very stressed out mares to have foals with the same type of stallions because they're good and they're producing and they're showing results, but then the foals are a fucking nightmare to handle, and then 3 years later they're getting shot, they've injured themselves, they've got kissing spines, they've hurt several riders, or they're unmanageable, they can't cope with life, and their world starts getting smaller because as the horses, especially with these hot horses, because they're so athletic, they scare people. Even some of the top professional riders, they're fucking terrified of these horses because they're explosive, so they start putting chiffonies on them, stud chains, whatever, to try and control these behaviours. And this is largely a breeding issue, a welfare issue, I'd say, with how we keep the horses, how we wean the horses, how we raise the horses after weaning. All these so such bad things for the horses have become common practice in the horse world, and it goes entirely against their nature. And to try and force these horses into a world that no longer exists for them, to a society that doesn't understand them, doesn't listen to them. And don't get me wrong, obviously we've come a long way from what we used to do with horses, but I think we've lost a lot as well in our working with horses. They're old horsemen that they may have been harder on the horses in punishment because times were different back then, but they had a better understanding of the horses. And don't get me wrong, I think our understanding of the horses is far better now, but we look too much to books. We look too much for someone to give us the answer. If you look at your horse, and I mean really look at your horse, spend time watching your horse, pay attention, feel your horse, use every sense you've got to notice when your horse is starting to become uncomfortable, because by the time your horse has exploded, you'll have missed 20 signs that things have gone wrong. You'll have missed loads that things are going wrong and heading in that direction. And oftentimes I find it really hard to convey to clients what I'm talking about when I'm seeing a horse that's about to explode, because for me, I get a feeling. Horses are very good at exerting pressure on people and things, and their intent is really, I can't think of the word to describe what I mean. Palpable? Is that the word? I'm going to have to Google what it means. Yeah, so it's horses that are stressed, they have that's the right word, a feeling or atmosphere so intense as it seems almost tangible. What the fuck does tangible mean? I've heard that word used before, but I don't actually know the definition. But I think I get the general gist of it. Tangible atmosphere of neglect and abandonment was almost tangible, perceptible by yes. So it's almost a feeling you feel it in your body. You can feel this pressure building, and it makes you tense and it makes you uncomfortable. It's what usually makes people correct their horses before something happens. And to outsiders, it may look like nothing had happened and the person working with the horse triggered that explosion. But the reason people have usually reacted that way is because they've felt that feeling that the horses are giving them. And instead of reacting like that, we can show the horses a better way to deal with their stress. Obviously, you have also got management that you have to get into place. So sometimes you've missed it and now you've got an explosive horse. You've just got to manage the situation until you can get them out of it, especially if you're dealing with road work. Sometimes we don't. So you've got a big tractor coming towards you. I don't really have much options to work through this. I'm just going to manage you until we get past it, or sometimes it doesn't work. But that's what I mean. This feeling that you get that something is about to go wrong from horses, you can feel it. You can feel their heartbeat through the saddle when you're sat on them. You can feel the muscles tensing up. You can feel them leaning in certain directions or looking back at you. It's a feeling you get. It's not necessarily something the horse is actually doing. It's a feeling. It's not necessarily the horse pinning their ears back, swishing their tails, stamping their feet. Usually by the time you've got to that point, you've missed a lot already. And oftentimes I think people are ignoring that feeling or not knowing how to respond when they feel it. Start to feel it. You can start to feel it long before it progresses into an explosion. It's one of the reasons I feel so confident getting horses to walk behind me when I lead them, and a lot of people aren't, I think that's a big reason, is that I listen to that feeling, I recognise that feeling, and maybe other people don't understand the feeling, maybe they don't feel it, maybe they don't understand, and if they do feel it, they don't know how to respond to it. All these sort of things that can affect how people react. So it's not about bollocking people and having a go at people for not being able to do this stuff. It's about explaining how to look at your horse in a way that really helps you understand them. And a lot of people are too busy in life to really look at the horses and really pay attention. And I said this to my partner with his dog. I was like, you need to look at your dog more early on in his training, and he really has, and there's lots more communication going on between us and our horses than we notice happening until the horses make it really obvious. And unfortunately, I think this is where language gets in the way. I think language is helpful, don't get me wrong, it's why our civilization has advanced the way it has, but it leaves a lot of gaps, and we rely heavily on language when we should be relying on what we see and what we feel more, especially with horses. And this is something people will always tell you, and you'll get people will talk about it, riders will talk about it, but then it seems to be spoken and not acted. Similar to how I get a lot of people will tell me they don't agree with seesawing their horses' mouths to get them to come round, and they'll talk all the science and they'll talk all the jargon about why it's bad and why they shouldn't be doing it, and then you watch them ride and that's what they do. They might not realise that's what they're doing, but that is what they end up doing, and so it's more than just people recognising it, it's people actually spending the time and effort to actually do it. And again, we're all so busy in life that we haven't got time for a horse that takes 5 minutes longer to pick their feet out because maybe they're a bit stiff and find it hard to balance and need a bit more time to adjust their legs to be able to pick the foot up for you, whatever it is, or they need a bit more time to be able to tack them up or whatever. We haven't got time for it a lot of the time, and so we just blow through our horses' boundaries because our world doesn't allow for it, and horses cannot get on board with that, and they can't understand any of that, like I was saying, external pressures that we have. Horses are very capable of understanding that you're having a bad day, you're in a bad mood, you're in a rush. They might not understand why you're in a rush, but they will understand the pressures of maybe you're acting like you've not got time for me, and that adds pressure onto a horse, and they have to learn to cope with that. But a lot of horses aren't taught to cope with it, and they're just expected to deal with the fact that you're in a rush, and then because the horses are nervous about it, maybe they can't stand as still, they're a bit uncomfortable with the whole situation, they then get shouted at. So horses then learn to associate when you're in that state of mind, you're not safe to be around. Whereas if we recognise we are in a rush, and rather than forcing our horses to just deal with it and feel unsafe around you, just tone back what you're going to do with them. The other day I was in a rush to get the horses sorted. I didn't bring Jasper into the stable. I wanted to pick his feet out in the field. I've done it before with him in the field, but I was in a rush and that put a lot of pressure on Jasper, so I got to pick 1.5 feet out, and then I got to stroke him a couple of times and I just left it. I lowered my expectations because I was not in a position where I could give him the time he needed to be able to understand this, which is fine. Over time, he will get to understand that as long as when I'm in that state of mind, I'm in a rush, I'm a bit frustrated, as long as I then don't get after him and start being like, you need to stand up because I need to get these jobs done, and I just lower my expectations, he will over time learn there's no threat of her being in that state of mind. It's not scary, her being in that state of mind. It's just a bit different. And it will no longer become a pressure to him. It's just another day. She's in a bit of a different mood. Things are going to go a bit quicker. Then they learn that it's not a problem and it's safe when people are in a rush. Whereas, telling them off and being like, I've not got time for this, I need to pick all... It's not going to kill a horse if they're struggling with the fact that you're in a rush and it's not the end of the world if you can't pick all their feet out. It's not the end of the world if you don't clip them in half an hour because they don't want to stand still and you've only got half an hour to do it. Just leave it. Do it another day. Do it a day when you've got more time. And you can always go, I never have time. Well, make time. Make time. Don't do one of the other horses for a day so you can work on this with your horse. It's just one of those things. Horses aren't made of fucking cardboard. They're not going to dissolve in the rain. They're not made of china. They're not going to smash because you haven't picked the feet out for a day. Obviously, some horses need it every day, It's not ideal at the minute, not being able to pick Jasper's feet out every day because I'm trying to treat his thrush. But today I didn't do it because it was absolutely pissing it down with rain. When I got him in the stable, he was really jumpy because the rain was falling on the roof. He'd not been in there while it was raining. It was not a day I was going to be able to get his feet picked out. So when our horses are struggling and they're showing signs of stress and they're showing signs of maybe not being able to cope with things that they could normally cope with because there are external pressures that they don't understand, just leave it. Just back off them. Give them an easier time of it and do it another day. And if more of this was done along the professional circuit, whereas rather than being in a rush to get them backed at 3, competing in the 3-year-old classes, competing in the 4-year-old classes, and the 5, 6, whatever, if we just took a step back and took more time and actually spent time with our horses, getting to know what they like as individuals, and spent time getting to know their signs of stress. Different horses will display early signs of stress differently. Jasper, if he's stressed, when I give him treats, he will bite at my hand to take the treat. That's a very early sign of him being stressed. And if I keep pushing him, he'll bite me. He'll become far more jumpy. Fox's early signs of stress is she's pacing in the field when I already get there usually, or she'll start pacing and she'll walk around. She doesn't really want to stand still. That's her early signs of stress. Some horses with early signs of stress, they'll just fling a leg out behind them. Small signs of stress. Doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be the fact that you're stood outside the stable in front of them or the field in front of them and not giving them any fuss. That can stress the horses out when they want attention. And they might just fling their legs out backwards or stamp their feet. All horses display stress in slightly different ways from one another, especially the early stages. Spend some time, look at your horses, and actually look at them. Pay attention to them. Be present with your horse. Notice them, recognise the behaviours they show, and it will always help you. And the feelings you get, pay attention to the feelings you get when your horses are getting stressed. If you or I can anyway, I don't know if other people can. If horses are getting stressed, I feel a heavy pressure pushing. If I'm walking in front of the horse, I can feel a heavy pressure pushing from behind me. It's a hard feeling to put into words. It's almost like the air goes still around you a little bit. Obviously it doesn't, but it gives that palpable feeling that something's about to happen. And pay attention to those feelings, and instead of correcting your horses, find a way to get your horse to work through it, get them to relax, get them to understand what you're asking them. Use treats. Fucking use treats. If your horse is finding something hard, but they're doing it and they're showing early signs of stress, use treats. Let them know what they're doing is right. Let them know it's not that bad. Or if they like scratches, if they really like a good scratch, give them a scratch. But most horses even in the early stages of stress, once you start scratching them, they're like, this isn't making things better. Just spend some time with your horses, watch them, get to know them, get to understand what they find fearful, isn't so fearful, especially if you're doing medical stuff. A lot of horses, they'll recognise it. It's going to sting. It's going to hurt. Of course they're not going to like it. Show them it's okay. Help them through it. Spend a bit more time on them with it. Anyway, I went on a bit of a ramble there and a bit of a rant. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you guys on the next one.